The Galapagos Islands, a daily challenge for survival. Join us as we take a trip to one of the most dramatic places on Earth, the Galapagos Islands. Get ready to see some extraordinary landscapes and exotic animals that you won't soon forget. So just where are the Galapagos Islands and what makes them so unique? They can be found 600 miles west of Ecuador, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Ecuador is also a country that is governing authority over the islands. Our adventure will begin in Ecuador's capital city of Quito, over 9,000 feet high in the Andes Mountains. Quito, along with the Galapagos Islands, is located almost right on the equator. From Quito, we fly out to the Galapagos Islands to begin exploring this treasure trove of biodiversity that has fascinated naturalists for centuries. They are unique in the world because they have been isolated for centuries, allowing nature to rule unspoiled by outside influence. Much of the island's flora and fauna can't be found anywhere else in the world. Almost all of the land reptiles are endemic, which means they exist only in that place or country. Specifically, of the 23 species of reptiles in the Galapagos, 21 are endemic and exist only here. Similarly, about 75% of land birds in the Galapagos are also unique to the islands. It is also a very harsh and barren landscape where existence does not come easily. Just how did the world come to discover the stunning array of wildlife on these islands? To answer that, we have to go back in time to 1535. On his way to Peru, Bishop Tomás de Berlanga's ship was blown off course and landed on the Galapagos Islands. He and his shipmates were the first to witness these enchanted isles, as they called them at the time. So what are these islands doing way out in the Pacific Ocean, 600 miles from anywhere? They were formed by volcanic action over the course of millions of years. In fact, the islands are actually a group of volcanoes. The volcanoes and the islands sit on a tectonic plate called the Nazca Plate, intersecting with the Pacific and Cocos Plates. These plates are pieces of the Earth's outer shell. The theory of plate tectonics tells us that upheavals along their boundaries resulted in volcanic eruptions over millions of years. These eruptions created undersea mountains, which continued to grow wider and taller until they finally appeared above the water, becoming islands. Some of these volcanoes are still active, with more than 60 eruptions over the last 200 years. The Galapagos cover about 23,000 square miles, but just over 3,000 of these are on land. Making up this archipelago are 13 major islands, 6 smaller islands, and many tiny islands. The other 20,000 square miles are made up of the ocean waters around the islands. One of the older islands, San Cristobal, was formed about 2.5 million years ago. And that is where our Boeing 737 landed after its flight from Quito. Leaving the airport, we were driven to the harbor where we met our boat, and it wasn't long before we were seeing wildlife everywhere. We quickly noticed that the animals here were very tame and had never learned to be afraid of humans. We started out our trip scuba diving and found that the abundance of sea life was astounding. Vast schools of jacks, hammerhead sharks, and dozens of other species seemed to fill the ocean wherever we looked. This incredible biomass of fish is made possible by the currents flowing through the islands every day. Even though the islands are in tropical water on the equator, the ocean surrounding the Galapagos is relatively cool. This cold water comes from the Humboldt Current, a strong ocean flow that starts in Antarctica and continues north along the Pacific coast of South America. Diving in such cold water meant that we had to keep warm by wearing either very thick wetsuits or sometimes dry suits. It seems a bit ironic that even though the islands are on the equator, the waters surrounding them came from the Antarctic. Carried in with these currents is nutrient-rich water, which can feed a multitude of fish. The result is an abundance of marine life, including countless varieties of fish and sea vegetation. Without this steady and available diet, the many birds such as boobies and tropic birds would not be able to survive. Suddenly, as we were diving one morning, a huge shadow loomed overhead. We thought at first it was a boat, but then we saw the fins. It was a whale shark. Even though they are the size of a school bus, whale sharks are gentle giants that sift plankton and small fish from the water, much like a baleen whale. They are also the largest fish in the world. After our scuba diving adventure, we made our way to the island of Santa Cruz, the main island visited by tourists. One of the highlights of our visit to Santa Cruz is the time we spent at the Charles Darwin Research Station. He was one of the first scientists to visit the Galapagos Islands and is also the most famous. With continued care, this natural treasure will remain a shining example of preservation for the rest of the world to follow. Thanks for coming along on our visit to the Galapagos Islands. Join us again for more exciting destinations.